Chapter 1. Quinn's in the Suburbs. My mother gave wonderful parties. She hated living in the suburbs, but she loved entertaining. She kept a bag in the credenza in the dining room that was filled with place cards for every occasion. There were place cards decorated with drawings of the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria for Columbus Day, George Washington's head for Washington's birthday. That was before they combined Washington's and Lincoln's birthdays into a single national holiday, and wreaths for Christmas. You name the holiday, she had a set of place cards for it. One year, she threw a Mickey Mouse party for my birthday. It was Mickey and Minnie, all the way. The house was festooned with mouse stuff, and my mom sent me around the neighborhood so I could give all the kids who were invited mouse ears to wear and a long black shoelace for a tail. Another year was the Raggedy Ann birthday party. My mother loved theme parties, and it wasn't just for kids. Her New Year's parties were famous. The entertaining dwindled around the time I was 6, but she did give one last New Year's Eve party when I was in 7th or 8th grade. In an attempt to replicate the Times Square ball drop, she strung netting along the ceiling of the playroom and filled the netting with balloons, which cascaded down at the stroke of midnight. The party stopped completely when she became too ill. A great hostess, she was also a terrible cook. I mean, terrible. Still, I was her eager helper. Usually that meant going with her when she picked up takeout, but on occasion she would cook, usually out of a can. Every vegetable I ever had at home, aside from iceberg lettuce, was canned. I recall once suggesting to my mother that we follow a recipe for tomato sauce that appeared on the back of a ketchup bottle, which I thought would be better than just getting the sauce out of a can. It wasn't half bad, so my mother decided to save the recipe. And she used it often, reading the recipe off the back of the bottle she had saved. I loved helping my mother. We adored each other from the very beginning. My sister remembers watching my mother and me preparing this homemade spaghetti sauce. I was maybe 8 years old, standing side by side with my mother at the stove, which was nothing unusual because I was always at my mother's side. I was on a step stool so I could reach over the pot and pour jars of ketchup into it. The ketchup went all over the kitchen, but nobody cared. My dad tells a story about her cooking when they were first married. Shortly after the wedding, my parents invited the priest who had married them over for dinner. My mother asked my father, "How do you make a roast beef?" He said, "Oh, it's easy. You just put salt and pepper on it and roast it for a couple of hours at 350 and you're good to go." My father didn't have any sisters, so he and his brother had helped in the kitchen. So my father came home from work, and my mother was in the bedroom, which was in the back of their apartment, getting ready, and the kitchen was filled with smoke. She hadn't taken the meat out of the wrapper or put it in a pan. She just sprinkled salt and pepper on the outside and put it in the oven at 350 degrees as instructed, or at least that's how my father tells the story. They took the priest out to dinner. She was a terrible driver, too. And she hated driving. Cooking and housekeeping, which my mother also loathed, and driving the car were what suburban motherhood was all about. This was a problem. Throughout her life, she was a die-hard city person. She missed the city. She felt isolated. She despised housework and gardening. Although my father adapted better to the suburbs, he missed the city as well. He never stopped talking about his magical childhood on 96th Street and 1st Avenue, which was not such a great neighborhood when he was growing up, a rough part of town, but he loved it, and still tells endless stories about the neighborhood as if it were paradise. So why did my parents choose this suburban life? In part because it was what people were doing in that era, and in part because in the late 1950s, it wasn't so easy to find an affordable apartment for a middle-class family in a good neighborhood in Manhattan. That's what pushed people to the suburbs. It still does. My parents wanted a nice home for the family. This was well before I was born, but my sister, Ellen, was around. So without doing much planning or research, they opened up the New York Times, saw an ad for a development in Glen Cove, Long Island, and got in the car to investigate.